Shalom. It is the 66th day of the war, the fifth night of Hanukkah here in Israel. It is December 11th at about 6 p.m. in Israel and 11 a.m. on the eastern coast of the United States. Let's get going with good news. Israel is making its way from the eastern border of the Gaza Strip, making its way west towards the Mediterranean and making great progress. If you remember, it did this in the north, came across the entire Gaza Strip and did a great job at killing the enemy and making sure that the land was Hamas and terrorist free. So Israel is making great progress in that regard. Israel is finding tunnels now into Egypt, which is where Hamas is starting to get some of its supplies from. Israel is finding those tunnels, blowing them up with bunker-busting bombs, and stopping the influx of supplies. Hamas terrorists are continuously losing contact with their supporters and with their commanders, as we talked about yesterday, and now are surrendering in large numbers because they simply have no orders and no idea what to do. It's assumed that their leader, Sinwar, is either dead, severely injured, or is in hiding in the western parts of Khan Yunis. He has not been heard from, as far as Israel can tell, and he's not talked about anymore, which is a bad sign for him. Some security sources in Israel are saying that the war might be over by February. That's how good things are going, and soldiers are already starting to return home. The mission is slowly being accomplished, and this is obviously great things. So we're watching as great progress is being made. Israel last night bombed Damascus heavily. This is supplies coming in from Iran, which we'll discuss soon. The Palestinians are threatening to strike in the West Bank in Judea and Samaria. That's the area that I live in. That's not where the war is. They're threatening to strike because they're not allowed in to work. There was supposed to be a vote yesterday in the cabinet whether to allow Palestinian workers from Judea and Samaria back into mainland Israel, where a lot of them have jobs. Since October 8th, they have not been allowed in. And many people in Israel, myself included, are against allowing them to come back in. We feel that it's too big of a security risk to have Palestinians running around in the midst of a war with permits to be able to come in. There's no way what they're thinking. And we saw in Gaza many people who thought that these were Palestinians you could trust. These were our friends for decades. Turned on them and killed them, raped them, beheaded their children, burnt them alive, and were not trustworthy. So that's where Israel is holding now. The Palestinians obviously angry about the fact that they can't get to their jobs in another country in Israel from where they live, and are now threatening to strike within their own lands. There's even people that have jobs within their own villages will strike. Strikes are usually a precursor to violence. Which is talked because it creates unrest in the region, and we'll have to see how Israel handles this and whether the Palestinians really go through with their strike. The National Security Advisor of the United States, Jake Sullivan, will be visiting Israel this week for discussions with Israel's leaders. This is one of the higher-ranking officials in the Biden administration, one of the more powerful people in the American government, and we're not sure exactly what his message is, but it could be hopefully a good one. Okay, but on to before we go into bad news, let's go into some analysis. Hezbollah, which is the Iranian-controlled proxy up north, it's a terrorist organization north of Israel in southern Lebanon. Southern Lebanon is north of Israel's border. Hezbollah now seems to be having gotten more weapons. Israel's tried to figure out where they were getting their weapons from. Israel had shut off weapons coming in from air from Iran, shut off the weapons being shipped in by truck, obviously by boat. They've stopped, so they were confused how Hezbollah was able to do it. Israel had its eyes looking for large vehicles and large convoys bringing mass amounts of weapons. What ended up Iran started doing was bringing weapons in smaller convoys and smaller amounts, and then moving them house to house. So it didn't seem like there was one large shipment coming in from Iran all the way to Israel. That was how all the way to Lebanon. That's how they were doing it. So that's what's been going on, and the the Israel then started realizing what they were doing. So Israel started bombing those houses and those buildings and blowing up the weapons. Last night, Israel hit a massive weapons depot. That's like a weapons warehouse almost, where Iran was storing weapons in Lebanon for Hezbollah, and it blew up. And there were reports of explosions all over Lebanon. Really, what was happening was there were secondary explosions, and I guess whatever after secondary comes, there are explosions of the bombs that the Israeli fighter jets are dropping. But then those blow up the weapons, the ordnance that are in with the depot in that building, and then those cause further explosions. So if you're in the area and you don't know what you're listening to, it sounds like there are multiple bombings going on. It's actually just one bombing and continuous explosions going on over and over as more and more of the weapons and explosives that are stored in this building blow up because of the fires that are there. Okay, that's good that happened. Bad that Iran has figured out a way to get weapons into Hezbollah. Let's hope that Israel now is able to make sure that doesn't happen. There were rockets fired at Tel Aviv today. It's not good that Hamas is still able to fire rockets into Israel. That has to be stopped. And the United Nations General Assembly is planning on, since their vote failed, like we talked about yesterday, in the United Nations Security Council to force a ceasefire. Now the United Nations General Assembly, that means that's all 196 countries together, will be voting on a ceasefire probably. Those resolutions that are passed in the United Nations General Assembly, where everybody is together, they don't have any teeth to them. They're just resolutions. They're not binding, which means that they can't be enforced. They're not international law. They're nothing. They're just a resolution. It's just a statement of this is what most of the world wants, and so it'll pass by overwhelming numbers for a ceasefire because who doesn't like a ceasefire? And so that'll pass, and there'll be nothing. Okay, some bad statistics, which in the long run, I know this is hard to say and it's hard to understand. I'm about to say statistics of how many Israelis and Israeli soldiers have been killed and injured. And we mention this frequently that even one soldier injured is horrific. A soldier killed is devastating. At the same time, we're in war. And in war, a reality of war is that soldiers die from both sides, and most importantly, from our side. And that is something we try to minimize. In a war, take, for instance, the 6-Day War, which only lasted 6 days and was a tremendous victory for Israel. Over 790 Israeli soldiers were killed. In contrast, I'm going to read these statistics. And again, there are soldiers that are family members of people. There are injured soldiers that are each of them is a world of their own. And anything that happens to them is horrific. But hearing these numbers shouldn't in any way, shape, or form demonstrate to us that we are losing the battle. Each of these soldiers are heroes and will forever be in our hearts and minds. We don't forget these people, and we are only here because of the sacrifices that they make. But since the start of the ground operation, 582 IDF soldiers have been wounded, 104 have been killed, 133 have been seriously wounded, 218 have been moderately wounded, and 231 soldiers are in good condition but injured. Since October 1st, October 7th, excuse me, since the Simchas Torah attacks, including the numbers we just said, 433 IDF soldiers have been killed, 1,645 IDF soldiers have been injured and wounded, 34 IDF soldiers are currently still in the hospital, 210 have been released and are in moderate condition, and 149 are in good condition. We hope that these numbers will stay the way they are. But realistically, we can assume that there will be more. Our soldiers that go out to battle, the parents that send them, are heroes. When I recorded yesterday's video, I just found out that a boy that grew up in our town in Mitzvah Yericho, whose parents live here, and who has since moved on and started a family of his own somewhere else, was killed in battle. It's hard. And Hashem avenged their blood. Let's answer some of your questions that we have. Where in Gaza was the new weapon depot that the IDF destroyed? I'm not sure where exactly in Gaza it was. What strategies or humanitarian efforts can be implemented to ensure the safety and well-being of civilians caught in conflict zones during the times of war? We try to do our best, but it's very important to note when people blame Israel for the humanitarian crisis that's going on in Gaza, and people blame Israel for the civilian deaths that are happening in Gaza. But let's keep in mind, every single one of those deaths and every single one of those injuries could stop right this minute if Hamas would surrender, leave Gaza, and free the hostages. No one else has to die. Israel has a responsibility to protect its citizens. Hamas has stated that they're going to conduct the attacks from October 7th again and again. That means that the only way we can be assured that those attacks don't happen is if we kill every single Palestinian terrorist. It's the only way we can be assured of safety. There's no other magic shield that we could put up that will protect us. The Simchat Torah attacks on October 7th showed us what happens if we do not kill every one of them. Every civilian death, every innocent child is not someone we want to hurt or kill. And we would stop as soon as we were clear that we were no longer at risk. The Israeli military and Israeli leaders' responsibility is to keep the Israeli people safe. It is not our responsibility to ensure that their people are safe and sound. It's our responsibility to make sure we do as much as we possibly can to kill the enemy and not hurt civilians. But if it's between us and them, it's us. By filling up tunnels with water from the Mediterranean Sea, aren't they also endangering the lives of Israeli hostages? Is the IDF completely sure that no hostages are being held inside those tunnels? So I actually discussed this in a class that I had today, and we would have to assume that before the IDF destroys a tunnel, that there is a moderately that they have done their research and are pretty sure that there are no hostages in that tunnel. Has there been any more negotiating on deals to get the hostages back? No, Israel is no longer negotiating with Hamas for the hostages to come back. The Hamas broke their deal the last time, so there's no point in signing a deal with somebody who's untrustworthy. Do Israeli army officials know that there are no Israeli hostages? And that's okay. Will you answer that question? What was the logic behind the UN wanting a ceasefire? The UN wants a ceasefire because they don't care if Hamas members are left. They want the Arabs to stop dying. Everybody wants Arabs to stop dying, but it's only Israel's concern, and thankfully their friends, the United States, England, France, that Hamas be wiped out as well. That's Israel's main goal. But countries all over the world don't care about that, so they want a ceasefire. Has the UN said anything about the remaining hostages that are taken by Hamas? So they don't care about that. No, the United Nations resolutions never mention the hostages. They don't mention the October 7th attacks for that matter. They are only interested in saving the Palestinian lives, and including, by the way, the terrorist lives. Do the recent surrenders of certain Hamas groups give up hope that the war is ending soon? Yes, it's hastening, it's quickening the end of the war. Tell me more about the system that Israel has created on Hamas. How do they create it, and what does it consist of? I have no idea what that means. Could you provide more details about the effects of Israel's plans to flood the Hamas tunnels with water? From the sea, taking into account worries about the possible collapse of buildings. Right? If you flood water into tunnels, and the tunnels are very close to the ground, and the water starts destroying the cement of the tunnels, and the ground is very soft on top of it, so then everything could collapse on top. What's the purpose of Israel filling up the tunnels, and why is it the strategy Israel is taking to try to beat Hamas in this war? Well, Hamas hides out in the tunnels. They keep hostages in the tunnels, and they keep weapons in the tunnels, and they hide from soldiers from Israeli soldiers in the tunnels. So we want to blow up the tunnels, destroy the tunnels, and not give Hamas members a place to hide, and especially not hide their weapons. Is it true the U.S. is only giving Israel until the end of 2023 to end the war? If so, why are they doing that? No, that's been reported. But it doesn't seem like anybody is showing that that's true. And Secretary of State, American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that it's up to Israel when the war ends. How would Israel change their strategies if they were able to capture or kill the leader of Hamas? Also, would this cause the war to end much sooner? Yeah, like we said yesterday in the video, if we kill the leaders of Hamas, and especially the leader of Hamas, so it's like a headless snake. It doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know what it's doing, and it's just slithering until it dies. Has Israel made any progress in identifying each hostage and which group has the rest of the hostages? No, unfortunately, no. How has Israel managed to balance between military operations and humanitarian considerations, particularly in areas where civilians may be affected by the conflict? Israel doesn't feel it's its job to balance it. Israel does as best as it can to minimize civilian damage, civilian deaths, and civilian injuries. That's its responsibility under international law. But its main goal is to kill Hamas. Do you think Hamas will eventually run out of materials soon? I don't know. I don't know what soon is, but let's hope so. That would be a very good thing. Okay, that's the end of today's video, and we'll make another video tomorrow, hopefully. Unless the war ends, that would be great, and we hope our soldiers come back safely and securely. Hostages are returned, and we have victory very soon. Shalom.